Hi there, my name's Dr. Marcus Bussey. I work at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Before I came here, I spent many years working in neo-humanistically oriented schools. Based on that experience, I want to introduce you to the cosmic curriculum. Now, human beings love stories. We have stories for everything, and we have stories for education too. We have a story such as, study hard now and you will have a great job in the future. That's a deferred gratification, sort of utilitarian type story. We have romantic stories like, study what you love and you will be happy. We also have stories that go beyond both of those and say, learn how to learn and you will be a lifelong learner. Or even push the boundaries further and say, well, look for meaning in what you do. And if it's not there, you must be looking in the wrong place. So the Neo-Humanist story, though, is the biggest story of all. It's the biggest story you can tell. Why? Because it's a cosmic story. It's a story of forms. It begins with the Big Bang and continues on until the present moment. This moment where you and I are all unique expressions of some play of forms across time and space. It assumes that there is a creative principle at work in this plane of being. The creative principle plays with forms. It is endlessly creative. In the biological sciences, we've come to call this evolution. But however you want to call it, we need to see it as a form of play. Drawing on the ancient tantric story of the Brahma Chakra cycle, the Neo-Humanist story tells of a time of outflowing of forms, from the etheric to the solid. This is the cosmological story studied by astrophysicists. In the Neo-Humanist story, however, once all the elements of the material world are in place and the planets are formed, we find life. Life is more conscious play. It's a conscious play with forms. So with life, biological evolution experiments with forms and forms of consciousness. There is a yearning to return to the beginning of the story. And it gives birth to spirituality as a process and to religion as socio-historical forms, collective forms that emerge over time to reflect the cultural and spiritual urge to return. This journey is described in the Brahma Chakra cycle. It is a cosmic curriculum. It provides us with a narrative that encapsulates everything that we wish to communicate through education. Within this curriculum sits all aspects of what we need to do in any classroom or in any learning encounter, in any workshop, wherever we are. This principle plays out. This curriculum of forms. For instance, we have the physical sciences that describe the material world that forms play in. We have the humanities that describe the socio-cultural forms that express our collective yearning and the struggles we face in working both individually and collectively towards achieving that return. We also have spiritual science, which works on the subjective journey to deepen our own relationship with consciousness and to understand how this yearning is best expressed in the world that we inhabit in time and space. So we have the objective world and we have the subjective world. And the story that informs this cosmic curriculum enables us to roll it out in all learning contexts. So when you tell the Neo-Humanist story and lay out it as a cosmic curriculum, then all learning becomes meaningful. Meaningful learning accelerates all forms of engagement with the tools of learning, literacy, numeracy, the kind of cultural knowledge required to navigate the complex world we have. It informs resilient responses to difficulties and struggles. It provides us with a sense of who we are in this large, messy, but wonderful play of forms. So the task before us as educators becomes one of embracing that story and learning how to communicate it through all that we do in the classroom. In the cosmic curriculum, there is nothing that does not have a meaningful place. Hi there, it's Dr. Marcus Bussey here. I am going to follow up on the Neohumanist Education Cosmic Curriculum Part 1, where I promised to talk about some of the things that I do in my classrooms and teaching engagements in order to I give some form and some expression to this cosmic curriculum vision that I presented in the first talk. I work at the University of the Sunshine Coast, where I teach history and futures. I'm senior lecturer in those subjects, and overall I've spent 20 odd years in classrooms and 16 years now at the university teaching as well. So in all that time, and running workshops all over the place as well, I've experimented with ways in which to convey meaningful learning. Without further ado, I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up of what I covered in the last talk, just in case you haven't seen it. First of all, I want to say that the cosmic story captures the entire arc of the neo-humanist learning story. Every aspect of learning, whether it be cultural learning, whether it's informal or formal, doesn't really matter, can be understood to fit into this cosmic story. In the short, it sort of situates the story of humanity within the larger story of the unfolding cosmos. Michio Kaku, a well-known physicist, had said that the whole point of evolution is to, I guess, enable the universe to come to understand itself, to know itself through the witnessship of consciousness. So in a sense, you could say that consciousness itself underpins the story. It's the chief player in this story. Before humanity and the emergence of culture, consciousness was locked within geophysical and then later biophysical forms. And within this, there were endless experimentation, particularly within the biophysical. With humanity, though, we arrive at culture, and the witnessing capacity of Homo sapiens emerges at this point. Because, in a sense, as many of our great mythic stories, origin stories tell, humanity steps out of nature and into culture, which immediately sets up this divide between the natural world and the cultural world, though they're deeply intertwined. We had to step into culture in order to look and witness nature and all those forms and all the play that is involved there. It comes at a cost, because of course there's now humanity alienated from the natural world as culture grows more and more away from, and has in our current iterations of culture taken on the domination over nature. But that's another story. So with the unfolding cosmic story, I guess what I really want to say is that it suggests there's a curriculum of forms. And let's really think about that, a curriculum of forms. So no longer is it disciplines. It's actually forms determine the kinds of learning and knowing that are potentially available to us. So we have physical forms, and therefore the physical sciences, cosmology through to geology, let's say. We have biological forms, the life sciences, biological sciences, everything from zoology through to botany. And we have cultural form as well. The cultural sciences, the humanities, including mathematics and language and so on. These are all learning domains that are suggested by the cosmic story. So, let's step away from this sort of abstract statements now and look at some of the practical implications as I've tried to explore them in my own work. In my classroom, for instance, I sought to ignite what I think of as the curricular imagination that finds the learning of the deep narratives provided by the cosmic story. So this curricular imagination is not something that I own and therefore deploy. It's something that actually emerges from the kinds of environment that you create in your own classroom. So I seek to democratize curriculum. I want the children, or currently my young adult or senior adults even, to have a role to play, to feel ownership of the learning process. Of course, they look to me as the person who has a sense of, I've got a compass, I know where we're going. So there is always that kind of authority there, but it is a soft authority. It's not precious. It's not holding on to, I want to achieve this or that. No. It's much more, what can we achieve? How can we co-create within the cosmic story a neo-humanist learning arc? Because whether it's 1 year, 6 months, 13 weeks, which is what I teach here at university, or whether I'm working with a PhD student, or whether it's in the past I used to have some students I had for up to 5 years because I taught composite classes. So over that 5 years, of course, you're going to cover a lot of ground, and need not be repetitive. It would be thematically oriented. It would be creative, and it would be a sort of a learning journey for us all. So I want to start off, let's say, first thing is, like here, a long timeline of the universe. I've created these with my students, with kids, let's say 8 years through to 12, 13 years in one group. We would create, and all around the classroom, all around, there would be a timeline of the universe from the Big Bang to now. That's really a great place to start, because then I would do things like organise dramas, you could say, and the dramas would be learning dramas. For instance, I'm thinking back to 2002 when we had a fantastic time. Great class, this one. And we set up this museum, but it was a museum that spanned time. It was a museum of the cosmic story. And kids would develop their own stalls and create dioramas that provide information on an aspect of this timeline. So they were kind of like booths, actually, where kids would set up their pet interests. There were 2 kids who did a booth on trilobites, for instance. A couple of others set up a booth on photosynthesis. And of course, these would be aligned with wherever they are on that huge timeline. So they knew why they were doing it, but they knew that what they were interested in fitted into this story, which is really the key thing here. It's knowing that whatever it is that turns you on actually has a place within this story. There were other booths on volcanoes, looking at tectonic shifts. They created things where they could pour in water and demonstrate, Pangaea breaking up and all that sort of stuff. There were others looking at the Olduvai Gorges, for instance, and particularly, I remember this one, they had created this diorama around those, I don't know if you know about them, but there are these very famous fossilized in volcanic mud and ash footprints from 3.5 million years ago, human footprints, where a number of adults and a couple of kids were walking across this section post-volcanic eruption or whatever it was, where this dust lay down, and it actually captured their footprints in amazing detail. So these sorts of things became part of this learning journey, built around the activity of, first of all, creating the timeline, and then well, how do we operationalize that? What sort of things can we do? And of course, the museum was open to the public. We had a day when grandparents and others could come in and walk around, and the children would talk about their own booth and demonstrate what they needed to demonstrate, or illustrate it, or just share their enthusiasm and knowledge. Okay? So this huge timeline is a work in progress. Of course, it can actually roll out over periods of time. It can roll out if you're teaching just a single year level, for instance. You could get your colleagues in to build timelines as well. And perhaps you could even coordinate what parts of the timeline you might use across the various year levels. Then the kids become familiar with it, and the cosmic curriculum is no longer your possession again, but it's shared across, let's say, 3, 4, 5. It could be across all the primary years, and so on. And when you move into senior, if the language were to be consistent, it could also be that the children would see, or the learners would see, that their learning is still meaningfully fitting within the cosmic story. On top of that, I want to make the point that, and this was another activity I did with these timelines, playing with timelines was a lot of fun, because the timelines don't need to end in the present. There are a range of futures that can be explored, where children would create various alternatives. It might be a bifurcation, or it might be a whole range, like a fan, of possible futures that they could explore, and they could put dates, and they would be therefore developing what I call the anticipatory imagination, and looking at the kind of momentums behind us, the things that they aspired to, the things that were plausible, sometimes just curious, wacky ideas, but also the things that they feared. They could all be mapped out. And when you can map something out, your ability to feel a little bit more in control of the future emerges. So also I want to point out that the cosmic story offers us a way in which curiosity and skill development grow over time as the knowledge domains grow. And that's part of, I guess, one of the broader objects of learning is that. But then it comes down to, let's get a little bit more detailed here. So kids create museums, they create activities, but what about the skills that are valued today? Literacy and mathematics and language and so on. Well, these all have stories. So, there's the story of Sanskrit, which is, an ancient language, cuneiform and so on. But then looking at language today, looking at language as we experience it in spoken language, written language, but written language now can be almost semaphore-like, like the shorthands of LOL and OMG, oh my God, or whatever it might be. Looking at the way that language is constantly evolving and shaping. Mathematics doesn't evolve and shape in the same way, but one activity that was really great that I ran for at least a month, if not longer, my memory's getting a bit stretched here now, was let's take the zero out of the number system. Because zero only started being used first in India, and then it spread around the year 900 or something like that. So it's been in use for something like 1,200-1,300 years. But if you take it out and ask children to explore mathematics in the absence of zero, it's a really, really interesting experience, because they suddenly come up with the kind of problems that, let's say, Romans can't do long division using Roman numerals. So it was that sort of fun stuff, and getting to think about that. So then they start to see that language, whether it's mathematical language or linguistic language, have evolved over time. Really cool activity. But other things there, problem solving within this cosmic story. So let's look at how bread was invented, or grain was domesticated, how to build pyramids, how to fire a pot, how also to live in peace. So it doesn't have to be sort of dealing with material culture. It can also be looking at cultural forms where the dominant hierarchical predatory agrarian state systems at different times experimented with other forms of peace. So there's the Pax Romana, which was actually quite a violent thing. But there was the Indus Valley civilization, and you can just play with these ideas and explore them. But going back to material culture, especially for young kids, it's really, really a great way of bringing in the cosmic story and making it concrete. So a number of times, at least 3 times that I can remember, I built raku kilns on the campus where I was teaching, and the kids would create ceramic stuff and we would fire it. But we'd do it at night when the light from the fire would be really, really strong, and the cracks between the bricks would be glowing, and the flame would be shooting at a huge rate from the little chimney that I constructed. And it was just like awe, the absolute awe that you created in kids. And I think awe is something that we shouldn't forget about. You know, we tend to kill awe by forcing them to learn long division or whatever it might be, or grammar, or wherever you're at in that sort of anal small curriculum that's disassociated from a cosmic story. But when you can bring awe and you ignite curiosity, and the curricular imagination really comes into force. So that's really important to remember. So behind this cosmic story sits, of course, other things. So you can look at the struggle that Darwin captured in the survival of the fittest mantra. But then we can also look at, well, there are other forms. We'll look at all the organic forms that are symbiotic in nature. How does harmony and partnership and even love play out in the organisation and the ordering of the cosmic story and the forms that it's taken over time? People didn't just create language, written language, should I say, text, in order to keep track of the bureaucratic requirements of a state. They also used it to create story and poetry and much beauty. So we need to remember that. So this sense that culture is one thing, it needs to be challenged. There are 2 processes at work. One is that culture is a love story for expanding our human potential, but it's also a fear story. So there's yearning and there's terror there. And to carry that in the back of your mind when you're working across curricula is really important. A couple of other points I want to make is that, you know, my friend Sahal and Ayatollah gave a talk just very recently, actually, and he must have a Sarkar, an Andamurti calendar or something on his desk, because he used this particular image behind me, this quote, which you can't read properly because I'm in the way, but I'm going to read it to you. So, there are numerous other stars and planets in the universe, says Anandamurti. With the further developments of science and with the help of interplanetary transportation, human beings will move to other planets. Yeah, Elon Musk must have read this, eh? And then the dream of today will become the reality of tomorrow. So that's the clincher. The dream of today will become the reality of tomorrow. So I want to emphasize within the cosmic curriculum that we inherit all these images from the past, and that if we take them passively, those images will colonize our future. So when I was talking about using timelines to move young people into the future so they can explore Australia 2050 or wherever you might be and whatever the context might be, you know, we need to actually understand that we as educators can work with images. There are enabling images and there are, you know, ones that disempower. And we need to be very careful how we provide access to those images as we tell our stories. So this brings me then to the mythic and the narrative. So in my own work, one of my chief tools is to tell stories. Actually tell stories from memory, and I'll draw on the board. Whether it was a whiteboard or a chalkboard didn't really matter. You know, and while I was doing that, kids would journal and draw along with me in their own books. The classroom would be deeply silent and engaged while I was drawing, let's say, a Greek myth or an Indian myth, Indian subcontinent myth. But also I did tell the story multiple times of Buffalo Woman Comes Singing, you know. So, and these drawings, my drawings, create the enthusiasm for these kids to capture and the stories in their own drawings, but they would also write little words down, a bit like the image behind me. I'm going to play a trick, says the boy who cried wolf, for instance. So we can take a favourite story, then one of the stories that might have been an absolute classic. Sometimes the kids would ask me to tell the story again, retell the story of Medusa and you know, having her head cut off and all that sort of stuff, because I love the details, the gruesome details. But we would turn those things into a play. We would discuss the moral dilemmas and the alternatives that arise within stories. At certain points, there's an alternative. Which way would the hero or heroine go? For instance, what kind of decisions did they miss because they assumed this or they did that? So Key to telling the story, though, is that you do it from memory. It's not a big book story. You're not reading to them or anything like that. That's another form of communication, and it works really, really well. I have to tell you, in 1998, I think it was, I read the entire of The Lord of the Rings to a class that insisted that I do so. And that had its own major things, and it led to a play and a whole range of other incredible learning side effects. But, text is important, but there are other literacies. So reading a story is one thing, but there is other literacies. And one of the literacies we don't grow particularly well in traditional schooling contexts today is the imaginative literacy, the capacity to co-evolve ecosystems of shared imagining. What Yuval Harari calls intersubjective orders, or imagined orders. Okay, and into all of that, there's sitting behind it is this deep love of what we're communicating about. So love sits there. It's powerful, and it's a fundamental organising principle, and it takes us beyond the superficial literacies of the world that we live in today, with its obsession with mathematical or numeric literacy and textual literacies. So last message today for you is have fun. Don't get in the way. I'm in the way, aren't I, of that image. Build learning communities day by day. I hope this has helped you, giving you a little bit of a start and thinking about how to harness the power of the neo-humanist cosmic story and take it into the living realities of your own classrooms. Thank you so much.